consequences can be applied to every position. So I think that, you know, one of the bigger trends in corporate America would be, instead of, and it's probably a different way to think, but when we start hiring executives, security leaders, chief security officers, they stop thinking about how the chief security person can save the company money or protect them. Security professionals have to begin to think about, how is security going to enable the business to make money? So there's definitely a bigger shift that's happening right now, is that when we look for chief security officers, and I sit with CFOs and CEOs of companies and saying we need to fix our security problem, we need to make this a world-class security function, instead of asking for a security professional who understands business, they ask us for a business leader who understands security. So there's becoming a shift in the market that should really start permeating how we think of our careers.
Ultimately, you know, that shift towards moving out of the cost center role and moving towards being a business driver is something we really haven't talked about as an industry. We're all still, our headspace, I mean, even this whole conference, our headspace is in technology and how we do all the cool stuff. Far too few of us are thinking, all right, how does what I do make the company money? Just not seeing it. Oh, sure it does. It is and it isn't. Let me give you an example. I worked for a large insurance company for a while. And one of the things that we tried to push for security was that security allowed us to negotiate better contracts with certain vendors. We were able to, because we could position ourselves as having less risk, we were a less risky business partner. At this point, we're driving the company's revenue generation, right? We're putting ourselves in a position where that risk management function allows the company to be more competitive within the field of offering different, you know, incentives in the contract. That's the kind of thought, that's the kind of thinking that we need to start to go towards.
So, and a lot of times at the executive level in security, security gets baked into key customer pursuits, because just for the very reasons that Mike aligned right there, is that the ability for a secure partner to be seen as a business advantage over against other weaker partners. Sometimes it's more about having better than your competitors, but being able to articulate that message in a multi-$100 million type contract win, that becomes humongous. So, I mean, that's just one example, but security is getting more and more baked into the acquisition process as opposed to the defense process.
It's the same thing that businesses went through in the 80s with quality. You know, up until the Japanese Revolution in the 80s, quality was really looked at as something that you didn't really have to spend on, because you could spend a whole lot of money and get quality, but then you'd lower your profit margins. And then they figured out, the slogan from the Deming people was quality is free. That if you put in enough quality, more people will buy your product, more people will be interested in you, and you will end up making more money by putting that investment in. And you're right, it's risk management. Quality is risk management, security is risk management. Ultimately, all it is managing your company effectively, managing your company well, and that's a business advantage. That's a business driver. And if you can teach the organization to articulate that to their customers and in the sales cycle, you become part of the business process.
And one of your goals as a security professional should be able to, if you're working in a corporate, to find ways to demonstrate to your employer that you're making them money and not saving them money. Questions?
Oh, hold on.
In my world, what I see is the head count for pure play InfoSec people dropping. And I was wondering, that's in my small world, and your broad view of the industry, what are you seeing, especially looking up to the 5 to 10 year timeline? Are you seeing more pure play InfoSec jobs get rolled back into IT, making security part of everyone's job?
I'll put my spin on this. I've said for a while that I think InfoSec is going away as a pure discipline. there are two real functions in our world today. There is the risk management function and the thinking about limiting business risk, limiting risk of loss, compliance, governance, things like that. And then there's the operations function. Well, we've already started to see the model of this. Things that used to be traditional InfoSec things, like firewall management. Well, how many of you guys, your firewall management group doesn't report to your CISO, it reports to your network operations guy, right? Most of the big companies that I work with, they're rolling firewall management into network engineering. They're rolling, what used to be vulnerability management into server ops just as the patch cycle. And so these operational things move towards that. The risk management things move towards the governance group. Legal, compliance, financial risk management, if you're at a financial services firm. They're already doing a lot of that. They already have a lot of people thinking about similar problems in different areas. So I think you're going to see a lot of the InfoSec thinkers move more into that group. You see there being less role for that pure play InfoSec person. And you end up asking yourself the question, do I want to be an IT InfoSec person, or do I want to be a risk management InfoSec person? And over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think we probably find that the pure play, there's always going to be a role for the pure play information security person, but it's not going to be, I remember like 5, 6 years ago, people used to talk about how InfoSec would be the biggest group within IT. I think that's a ludicrous idea.
So I'll give you, I have a client and a friend of mine, somebody I know for about 12 or 15 years. He's the CISO of we'll call it a Fortune 50 large financial, so one of the largest companies in the world. And his last role was to be the senior VP of security operations. And he said to me, called me up one day, he said, I have a very interesting job. He said, the more efficient that I am in my job will be when I actually work myself out of a job. And his job was to eliminate all the IT security operations functions or to outsource them to India and Asia. And so do I think that and so it's kind of interesting, right? The government, the big articles before the show, with 20,000 people, we need our government needs. They've assessed that we need 20,000 information security professionals. So who's right? And I think the answer is this: is that security will continue to be a discipline, but it will be rolled into, it'll become a component of other positions. And, I don't think that you might not have more dedicated security headcount. Your security headcount might become more strategic as opposed to more tactical. So I think that that's something that we have to think about with our careers. You have to think about that in a broader horizon. What's the shelf life of my technical skills? What's the law of diminishing returns? How much will somebody really be willing to pay me if I'm the best insert technical security skill here person?
And that's the firewall engineer model is a good one to look at. If you go back to 1997, firewall engineers were hot. If you could do firewall engineering, you were very employable.
You weren't very employable. You were. You could write your own ticket in New York City. If we found people with, I've been recruiting since 1996 in this space, right? But we were able to find people who had checkpoint firewall skills in that time, 130, 140, 150, and up. And because it was supply demand, right?
And now it's a component of the network engineering job, and it's sort of entry level skill.
It's expected,
right?
You'd be expected to know how to administer a firewall.
How much of the cool stuff that we do today will be in that same model 13 years from now?
Think about pen testing, right? Think about the shift in pen testing from networks to wireless, web application, software security. You're starting to see, look, web apps are still pretty hot, but they're fizzling a little bit. Web app security, web app pen testing was a lot hotter 3 years ago. And you start thinking about where it is now, and now you're seeing a little bit more. Forensics is coming to become a little bit more of a hotter skill. Incident response, incident management, breach management. These are all newer things that are kind of moving. So I think that one of the things you have to think about in your career is that if you could mark where you are now, figure out where you might want to be, and understand what you need to do to enhance your current skill set so that you do not become obsolete. Nobody wants to be the last buggy whip maker. Not many buggies running around the streets. Questions?
You want to?
Okay, I'll do it.
You can run this time.
So, do you guys see any trends from a converged environment standpoint, say private cloud, public cloud? And I realize that those terms are overused at this point, but do you see, for instance, if you move your environment into a private cloud or a public cloud, what's the role of the InfoSec professional when, in the cloud?
So my business partner made a funny statement in one business meeting, one of those non sequiturs that just comes out. Somebody asked him about how do you do security in the cloud? How do you handle that? And he said, same way as on the ground. And I really thought that was a poignant idea. I don't think we've really shifted that much in terms of our role in cloud security, because cloud security is ultimately just a question of the data's in a different place. The data has different exposure. How's that any different than what we've had to do as data got more mobile? We have to deal with USB keys and USB drives and data moving more easily. It's just a new storage location for data. And I don't think that there's a radical redesign in the entire. The principles of risk, threat, vulnerability, and value still they're the same. It's just a slightly different calculation. It's always prudent. So it depends on what you're asking. From a career perspective, it's always prudent to be studying what the next thing is. I think you kind of have to, especially in our industry. I rant about our industry a lot because I think our industry is probably one of the hardest industries in the entire world to make a career in, because the security issue is always in the new technology. It's never in. You very rarely see something that's, oh, this is a vulnerability in a 13-year-old piece of technology that no one's ever found before. It's always in the new stuff. So unlike accounting, where the rules have basically been the same other than a few tweaks for the last 100 years, our industry, if you knew today what you knew in 2005, you would be so obsolete in this industry that you wouldn't even be worth talking to. So
that might be a little bit. Everybody's worth talking to.
Well, but as far as
Mike might be a little overboard
from a hiring perspective.